Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new DC News Roundup. We've got quite a few things to talk about today. From Joker 2, we've got some brand new pictures there. There was some rumors surrounding the Batman 2, its villains, and possibly a certain Robin getting involved, but it's since been debunked by Gunn, but there's definitely some things I want to dig into there because there may be some grains of truth in all of that. We've got a couple of DC leaks, which is interesting, surrounding Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. Gunn has replied more about Superman Legacy, and there's a little bit of Lobo stuff in there. There's also maybe a little bit more. There's something for everyone, but as always, guys, this video is time-stamped. Feel free to skip around, but I do recommend listening to all of it just so you're very, very up to date. So, first of all, let's get into the good old Batman Part 2. And then there's a little bit of Arkham stuff I want to discuss. But we've also had interesting things surrounding the Batman Part 2 for a very, very, very long time now, especially with these characters. So what am I talking about? Well, according to Daniel RPK, Professor Pig, Scarecrow, Clayface, Hush, and Dick Grayson will be in the Batman Part 2. So this was flowing around. I was getting it sent to me. I was like, okay, I might do a video on this tomorrow. And here I am. And also, apparently, filming is aiming a summer 2024 start date. More on that in just a second. But since this news broke and you guys were sending it all to me, we've had James Gunn say, nope, totally made up. Now, of course, Gunn, being the head of DC Studios, would know what Matt Reeves pitched for the Batman Part 2. He's acknowledged that there's no script as of right now, but he knows the general ideas. They were talking about characters, as I've mentioned before. Matt Reeves and James Gunn have kind of both said that they're doing a bit of air traffic control with regards to Batman. They don't want to use the same characters, so you don't want to have Mr. Freeze as the main villain of Part 2 if they're going to do Mr. Freeze fairly soon in the DCU. So all I'm trying to say there is James Gunn totally knows what's going on with the Batman Part 2, even though Mattson Tomlin and Matt Reeves are still putting pen to paper. And speaking of Mattson Tomlin, the co-writer of the Batman Part 2, just to cement in the debunking, if you will, of this rumor, we had him go to Twitter, post a GIF with a bit of a chuckle there, and he literally says, lol. So he's basically and evidently referring to the rumor, just kind of looking at it and being like, guys, if only you knew what we've really got going on here. It's basically not true. On top of Gunn saying it's not true, he's also laughing at it. But what I do want to say, and you guys know me, I am the first person to say take rumors, even if I come to you with a rumor, with a grain of salt. But with this one, I am inclined to say, at least in my own opinion here, that there may be grains of truth in this somewhere. And I only say that because, let's go back to the rumor. Professor Pig, Scarecrow, Clayface, Hush, and Dick Grayson will be in the Batman Part 2. So, ignoring Dick Grayson for a second, these villains have been floated about for so long. This goes all the way back to The Hollywood Reporter in October of 2022, where they said, meanwhile, in Gotham City, filmmaker Reeves is quietly making his own expansion plans. Reeves is developing a sequel, as we know, and then they get to, but Reeves is plotting more. The filmmaker is meeting with writers and directors to build out movies. Yes, movies, not just series, like The Penguin, focused on Batman's rogues gallery, both established and more obscure, with characters ranging from the Scarecrow to Clayface to Professor Pig. Now, granted, they end it off on saying all those projects are in the very early stages of gestation. And then DCEU Reddit leaks posted 9 months ago a similar thing, but with the addition of like a Poison Ivy story supposedly based on Rappaccini's daughter. And then as of the past 9 months since then, we've just had various scoopers saying more or less a similar thing. So all I'm saying here is that Gunn's saying, nope, totally made up. The thing is, Gunn is, when he replies sometimes, as we've literally had the case before, when he says something like that, and again, I'm almost cringing myself out. I don't want to read too deep into it, but he could be saying, yep, nope, totally made up to all of it. None of those villains are in it. But it could just be, nope, that's totally made up in terms of the way it was laid out. So Scarecrow, Clayface, Professor Pig. Oh, we've also got Dick Grayson in there as well. Of course, yeah, he could look at that and be like, nope, totally made up. But for example, the sequel movie could have Hush in it. Hush has been something that has been talked about for a long time. And I always say this with things like this. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not true, but I wouldn't be surprised at the same time if not this specific rumor with the way it was laid out is true. It's just if maybe one or two, or maybe just one one of these characters was chosen or is somehow involved in the Batman sequel. Now, that could be like fairly obvious to say because that is quite a range of villains: Professor Pig, Scarecrow, Clayface, Hush, and whatnot. But just bookmark it in your minds with regards to how, after hearing all of these rumors for the past year or so since October 2022, that maybe something might come out of it. It's just that whoever these sources are telling these people or these insiders all of these things for the past year plus, even major trades, it might be getting misconstrued. Some people even think not necessarily villains for the Batman Part 2, but maybe for the DCU series, where you have an episode about one of Batman's rogues gallery throughout the series, episode by episode. Let's just say it's an 8-episode limited series, and we're going to get more into that in a DCU video I have planned coming up, and I really enjoyed making that one. Now, with regards to Dick Grayson and the summer 2024 filming start date, so this is another whole thing. And another thing with Daniel RPK, what I have to say here is that insiders like this, and there's several out there, well, many actually, Daniel RPK has got some things right, but obviously clearly not all of it, as per being shut down by James Gunn and Mattson Tomlin laughing at this. But I believe Daniel RPK did get the Fantastic Four castings correct, and I think he was even cited in major trade articles, which is a pretty big deal. But my bottom line consensus on that is like, okay, that's the thing, being an insider or a scooper. You throw some things at the wall from sources, you get some things right, but you throw some things at the wall like this, and it's like, oh yeah, that might not be right. But again, to hammer down on the way it was presented, that might be the very thing that is being debunked. But maybe one or two things, such as maybe the summer 2024 filming date could be true, because that is something I have talked about before as well, from what I've heard. And if you guys remember, I made a video not so long ago saying what's going on with the Batman Part 2. Long story short here, I'm going to try not do a long story long. It's just that essentially, as the script is still being written, they're not going into pre-production right now. So, you know, usually there's a couple of stages. There's like the conceptual stage where you do designs and everything like that. And then like the main second stage of everything is when you would start building physical sets. So like in the Batman Part 1, we had the cathedral set built and various other things built. And I believe that took quite a while, from June or July of 2019. And then they didn't start filming until the new year of 2020. So that's quite a while of getting everything ready, obviously, and then obviously COVID happened. But it gives you an idea of if the Batman Part 2 hasn't even started that second, you know, actually getting everything swinging, getting the crew in some capacity to start developing sets or whatever they need to do, then the tentative filming date of March, which is the same as Superman Legacy, it might not be that. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the release date will be pushed back, but the filming date could be pushed back until, well, it's at March right now, so maybe May, maybe June. They're saying July here, but let's just bookmark this one and see what happens. Now, as for Dick Grayson, you guys know my thoughts about that. I don't necessarily think Dick Grayson should be a full-blown Robin in Part 2. I think that should happen in Part 3 if Matt Reeves is deciding to do that. Now, that's not me ruling out Dick Grayson appearing in Part 2, because I've said that the whole plot of Part 2 should be whatever Part 2 is going to be. So Hush, Mr. Freeze, you name it. And then Dick Grayson, the Flying Graysons, happens some part in the latter of the movie, and it kind of sets up that third movie with Pattinson's Batman and Robin-esque film. But again, I'm not set on that at all. That's just my own speculation I've said again and again. And for all we know, there really might not be a Robin at all. After all, we've had, and we know that Matt Reeves has had a meeting with James Gunn to talk about this, as we went over earlier, to make sure that they're not crashing into each other with Batman ideas. I have speculated before that with Batman the Brave and the Bold, Dick Grayson should most likely be Nightwing, considering that Damian Wayne is coming in. So the days of the DCU Batman training Dick Grayson as Robin, we should be past that, if you think about it. So technically, I don't think that should rule out Robin from the Batman trilogy. But then again, there still might be a Robin as of when Damian Wayne comes into the story. And that could be, let's just say, Tim Drake. And maybe James Gunn said, hey, don't really do Robin. I know you could do Dick Grayson, but I rather, even though our Robin's going to be Tim Drake, maybe let's just keep it to one Robin across any universe anyway. Let me know what you think of the potential of the grains of truth. Again, that's not saying all of it is true, but maybe nuggets of it, if presented a different way, that could maybe be on something, especially as it's been reported for the longest time now. But let me know any and all thoughts thoughts down in the comments below. Now, in related news, somewhat, I guess, Matt Reeves' Batman, but now DCU Batman with the Arkham series, we've had on threads here this user asking, just curious, was there a reason why it wasn't included in your guys' announcement back in January, despite a second season having been previously announced? And they're on about Peacemaker there. And James Gunn says it just wasn't included as a new announcement, but when I originally presented to the press, it was a part of it. So he's just saying that there was no point putting Peacemaker Season 2 as a part of that Gods and Monsters lineup, if you will. But this is when this user here asks, why wasn't the Arkham show? And I've had a lot of people ask me that as well. And James Gunn said it hadn't been pitched to us yet. And then this user says, did it get pitched pre-strike? And James Gunn says, yes. So this is very interesting because I thought that maybe the Arkham DCU series, considering we've done a whole video going over how things transpired from the foundations of a Batverse Arkham series and now all the way to a DCU Arkham series, that I initially said that the meeting could have taken place. I mean, we know it was January and we know the Gods and Monsters announcement video came out in January, but when was that recorded? The meeting could have been happening around the same time. But even then, there's another option of how the Arkham series in the DCU might not even be a part of those first 10 projects, and James Gunn just wanted to announce 10 projects of Chapter 1. How do we know that the Arkham series, for all we know, is coming out after The Brave and the Bold? So it might not necessarily be in that lineup video that was uploaded to YouTube on January 31st. But what he says here, it kind of changes the narrative a little bit, because the Arkham show, he's saying the reason why it wasn't in the Gods and Monsters YouTube video is because it got pitched pre-strike. So you could still say January in that meeting he had with Matt Reeves, in where he also said after the meeting, James Gunn himself, he said that Matt Reeves pitched us some amazing things. So it just really made sense that one of those things, on top of telling him his plans for the Batman Part 2, was the Arkham series. And this could still be the case, but I think a lot of people are taking, oh, did it get pitched pre-strike to mean before May, because that's when the writer's strike started. And then that would have meant, well, after the January meeting that Matt Reeves had with James Gunn, they had another meeting at some point, whether it was over Zoom or something like that, or in person, I don't know, sometime in February, March, April, anything before May, basically. When he says it hadn't been pitched to us and, it got pitched pre-strike, well, pre-strike, another major trade said that something else, Batman villain related, got pitched to DC Studios. And that is this article you're seeing on screen, which seems very familiar. Mike Flanagan pitches pick on Clayface to Warner Brothers DC, The Dish. And guess what date it's uploaded? March 29th, right before the writer's strike. And a similar thing happened with Matt Reeves, apparently, somewhere around before the writer's strike commenced. Now, we have obviously had Mike Flanagan say, well, I promise if there's anything to tell you about the Clayface series, I would. A lot of us have taken that as what a lot of directors or people involved in projects say. It doesn't mean that it's not necessarily true. It's just that there's nothing worth saying right now. Maybe there's been some talks behind closed doors, but there isn't anything to officially say. So I just find all of that very interesting. And again, I bring up that Hollywood Reporter article from October 2022, when there was individual projects apparently being looked into for Batverse spin-offs. And one of them was Clayface. Boom, meeting with Matt Reeves, apparently before the writer's strike, to pitch the DCU Arkham series. And then boom, a freaking Clayface series. And even Deadline says here they didn't know if it was for the DCU Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters slate or Matt Reeves' Batverse. So I don't know. Maybe there is going to be a Clayface project announced in the future, or it could be, again, what I said, it's all misconstrued. There's grains of truth in it. Maybe Clayface is involved in some way with Mike Flanagan, but it could be for the Arkham series. It could be for something else. But bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, I think, to say it once more, there is grains of truth somewhere in all of this. But the way that it's been presented for the past year or so has never really been truly accurate. So moving swiftly along, here's some news that I missed from a few days ago. So there was apparently a plot synopsis for Superman Legacy revealed, in where it said, Superman, a cub reporter in Metropolis, embarks on a journey to reconcile his Kryptonian heritage, which is familiar with what Gunnar said before, with his human upbringing as Clark Kent. Now, this is where Gunn said, not sure where this logline came from. I didn't write it. But it has elements of truth, obviously based on the things I've said in the past, yep. But I wouldn't describe the plot this way, and I wouldn't call Clark a cub reporter. He's a 30-year-old full-on reporter. So what I'm interested in here is just a little tidbit of where Clark is at in his reporter mode. So he's not a cub reporter. He's not been there for like 2 months necessarily. Clark has been, as described here, he's a 30-year-old full-on reporter. So it's kind of matching up maybe to what I've said. I mean, obviously Clark Kent could have worked somewhere else, got experience reporting before he got to the Daily Planet. Who really knows the, details like that? But I think Superman Legacy, Clark would have been wearing the red cape, flying about as Superman for, I hope to be around 3 years. And I think he's been a reporter for around about the same time. I could be wrong about that, but, that's year after year after year of reporting, being very competent, you'd think, at your job as a reporter in the Daily Planet, working with, Perry White, Lois, Jimmy Olsen. So I'm really excited for that aspect, to be honest. And it's just cool to know that he's quite experienced, and maybe that's why he could be working with Lois, and maybe he's been under Lois's wing for some time. Maybe that's how they got romantically involved. But will they get romantically involved in the movie, or have they been romantically involved for like a year already? All of these details I'm dying to see. And then up next, sorry to disappoint anyone, but we've had this user say, what's the likelihood of seeing what the suit looks like before filming in March? And James Gunn said 0.0. But don't panic. So what this means is that I think some people, including myself to be honest, but James Gunn isn't Matt Reeves. And what I mean by that is it would have been so good before filming to get maybe a screen test. For example, Todd Phillips did this with Joaquin Phoenix. We got to see him as Joker and Arthur. Matt Reeves did it with Robert Pattinson's Batsuit. So imagine like a camera panning with a little bit of a wind machine. You have maybe the rough version of the Superman Legacy score, because Matt Reeves did that with Michael Giacchino. It wasn't fully done then, but you still got the dun, 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 dun. Imagine that, but then you start from the bottom, the camera is panning, but also turning at the same time as it zooms out of the red cape from the boots up, and you see David Corenswet. But I admit I'm fully projecting how much I fanboyed out when we got what you're probably seeing on screen right now with the Batman. I just think that would be really good to gain some hype, especially if it's possibly inevitable that we are going to see David Corenswet in the suit during filming, especially as they're filming all over the world, so they will be on location in some areas. But to be honest, it could also just mean that we're not going to see the suit revealed before March in an official promo photo, but when they're already filming, maybe Gunn will put out a really good look at the suit when he just knows that people or press are just going to get shots of it anyway. And I think that's smart. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? You want to get the best look out there yourself before anyone can get a shot from like a mile away and people are just like criticizing little details of the suit that don't really reflect how good it looks with a decent photo. All right, so up next we got a couple of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow leaks. Now, in case anybody doesn't want to watch this, it really isn't spoilery in my opinion. This is from DCE Reddit leaks, soon to be known as DCU Leaks, but I thought I'd put it out there. Obviously take it with a grain of salt, even though, again, this just makes sense to me. So they say Crypto will be in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow and the greater DCU. So if you've read Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, you'd know that Crypto is very much so in the story. Some people were wondering if Crypto would already be in Superman Legacy, but that might not be the case. And then some of these other things are just descriptions. Kara is being described as having a punk rock edginess to her with a humorous side. This version of Supergirl will have some toughness to her since she watched her planet die as a kid. And then they also said, we initially reported Supergirl won't be cast until a director comes on board for Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, but we've now learned that Gunn will cast her before the director is chosen. So that is super interesting to me. They also say Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow will begin filming during the second half of 2024. That's also interesting, just to give you a lineup of the DCU slate. But Gunn, if hypothetically, assuming this is true, so mega grain of salt here, but if Gunn casts Supergirl, then that makes me think that Gunn would be casting Batman for Andy Muschietti's Brave and the Bold, because don't forget he's directing that, and we've been wondering, well, would Andy Muschietti be choosing the actor? And I've always said, well, Gunn would obviously have to sign off on it at the end of the day, but this is interesting to me because if this is true, then you would have to think that Gunn, since this is his DC Universe that he mapped out, granted he's not directing every movie, he might really kind of want to be like, okay, I really want this person as Batman. I really want this person as Supergirl. The description here makes sense. I mean, as James Gunn said, when Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow was announced, he said, in our series, we see the difference between Superman, who was sent to Earth and raised by loving parents by the time he was an infant, versus Supergirl, who was raised on a rock, a chip of Krypton, and watched everyone around her die and be killed in terrible ways for the first 14 years of her life, and then came to Earth when she was a young girl. She's much more hardcore. She's not exactly the Supergirl we used to seeing. So that just reminded me. So she then came to Earth when she was a young girl, which somewhat implies to me, and that makes sense, obviously, but I think she has been there for a little bit. It's just that Clark, or for a while even, it's just that Clark is Superman, and in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, it's got to follow the plot of her going on that spacefaring adventure with Krypto and everything that comes with that. It's just it also helps her forge her own identity separate from that of Superman. So yeah, that's combined with these leaks kind of gives you a little bit of extra context. But as with what we're saying quite a bit at the minute, we're going to have to wait and see. All right, and now in the last piece of DCU news, before we get onto the new Joker photos, Joker 2, if you will, we have the worst kept secret in DC, I suppose, with Lobo. Because we've had Peter Safran's wife, I believe, say here, Natalie Safran, reply to this user who said, "Bring on Lobo," just in the comment of a picture of Peter, her, and Jason Momoa. And she literally replies, "You know it," with a little kind of explosion boom kind of thing. So, I mean, there's two ways of looking at this. She could just be like, "You know it," like it doesn't really confirm anything, but you know it, commenter, you know it, like that'd be cool, wouldn't it? Or, you know, sometimes this happens and where she might have thought that it's kind of public news. She could have been reading headlines kind of thing. For example, Barry Keoghan's brother heard or saw plenty of headlines out there that he could be playing the Joker because it was a rumored thing. So in his head, he thought it had already been announced because there was countless articles from various different outlets of reliability to, you know, not so reliable. And it gave him the impression it was already announced. So he said, "Oh yes, now that it's out, my brother," right? So it could be that kind of thing where she's just like, "You know it." Either way, guys, Momoa is basically Lobo. I don't think we need to talk about that one anymore. And lastly, for this video, this is freaking eye candy to me. I know some of you aren't nearly as hyped as I am for Joker 2 because it's a musical, and we all fear musicals, but I'm joking. I get it. I get some people's apprehension there. But we had Todd Phillips on Instagram say, "Wishing everyone a happy holiday and a beautiful new year. October 2024, #Joker 2. So right here, we can see Arthur Fleck, Joker himself, behind a cell in Arkham. You know, you got E258 there, more on that in a second. And the door, though, I just find that such a cool Arkham door, if it is the Arkham door. I think it is. But the reason why I say that is because it looks like the kind of door that wouldn't be reflective of the very clean-looking Arkham that we saw Arthur leaving the bloody footprints behind in that corridor at the very end. So I know I'm already getting into speculation, but I cannot help myself. When it comes to anything like this, it just energizes me so much. But with this movie, as we know, like the first movie, a lot of it was unreliable. Like, was this real or wasn't that real? It's quite open to interpretation that way. There's certain events that are going to obviously be real, like Murray dying on the Murray talk show from Joker shooting him. And obviously in this movie, with what we've seen, Joker's going to be going to the criminal court in Gotham to face trial for that. And somewhere along the way, he could escape. Who knows really how it's all going to go down. But what I'm trying to get to is, with Joker Folie et Deux being a shared madness, well, there's going to be a lot more unreliable narration. So I wonder if this Arkham we see in the second movie is a lot more grim than what we saw in the first movie. I mean, that's not technically true, because when we first saw Arkham, when Arthur was going there to get his mother's records and everything like that, it wasn't nearly as clean looking as the very ending scene. That very ending scene really screws with you, to be honest, very intentionally so. So maybe in the second movie with Arthur being in there, we're going to see it kind of much more grim again. Now, again, I'm not saying that is the case because some people have pointed out to me, it's like, well, Boba, how do you know that clean floor at the end wasn't just another floor of the Arkham we saw earlier on in the movie? I can't disagree with that technically, but I don't know. You would have thought that the state hospital would have been pretty uniform if that was the case. So yes, that's really cool. And E258, and I'm not going to take credit for this one, as pointed out by Joker Folie News here, and I think this is really interesting. In the image released, Joker is confined to cell 258 at Arkham. In the comics, Arkham made its debut in issue 258 of Batman with emphasis on Two-Face, fueling speculation about his presence in Joker Folie Deux. And I feel ashamed, I should have known that. But yes, I loved that because I did Google it. I was like E258 and I was like Batman E258. Nothing was really showing up. But then I saw this and I was like, yes, this is what I was kind of looking for. And the reason why it's so cool is because, yes, this is really true. Arkham appeared in Batman 258 and obviously Two-Face is involved. And what we know from Joker filming is that when Arthur is going to the Superior Court in Gotham, you've got some signs from all of those people outside. If you guys remember when we saw our first look at Harley, you saw all of those protesters, some people against Arthur and loads of clowns like rallying in support of Arthur. And some of their signage said Dent is a clown because they obviously don't agree with the district attorney prosecuting Arthur in this trial. So, I mean, E258 being when Arkham was introduced and when Harvey Dent is in that same comic, well, it's just like, well, in Joker 2, we know that Arkham is very much so involved in that film, and so is Harvey Dent. And I've always said, what if, and I don't think it will necessarily be, I don't think Two-Face is going to be a big thing in this movie or anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if in, let's just say Arthur escapes from the Gotham Superior Court. Let's just say there's an explosion or just some kind of chaos. I mean, I think there is going to be something like that. Maybe Harvey's face, half of it gets injured. And I know it's so silly to say, but I know a lot of you guys get it as well. But look at that Arkham door. It looks so freaking cool. But up next, we see a picture of Joker with Harleen Quinzel there looking at him very, very endearingly. Like she's just like, oh, Mr. J. It really is that look. I'm going to hammer down on this. I know some of you, I always get a comment saying, Lady Gaga, seriously? I vouch for her. Like, seriously, I'm very happy that she's in this movie. Obviously, with it being a musical, she's got an amazing voice. But I do think she can act. I thought she was great in As a Star Is Born. I saw her in American Horror Story. She's been in other things. So, I do think she will play the role of Harleen pretty damn well. Now, what's interesting in this photo as well is that you have Arthur in the full Joker makeup there. We can't really tell what's going on in the background, but what I wonder, the first thing that came to my mind is this somehow within the Superior Court of Gotham? You can see a little bit of a background there. I wonder if those are some people who got in to witness, to go in the stands to watch the trial unfold. So I don't know. But then if this is the first time round in the court, I don't know if he would have gotten away with wearing that Joker suit and the Joker clown makeup. And we know he turns up into court in some fairly ordinary, a normal looking suit, which as we saw later on in filming as well, it looks pretty dusty, which led to the speculation of some kind of explosion. There's a bunch of rubble or, a clean sheet of dust and stuff that goes over him. And we saw the videos of him running throughout the streets of Gotham. I really don't know, but I think it's just really cool. I think, for a Harleen look, Lady Gaga looks like Harleen there. Or I think she's going to be called Lee in the movie for short. But seriously, guys, this just fuels my hype for the movie. I cannot wait for our first look. Some people are speculating maybe Valentine's Day. I think that'd be pretty appropriate. They most certainly have enough footage to show us that by then, because this finished filming ages ago and it's still not coming out until October of 2024. And this isn't exactly a CGI-heavy movie. All I'm trying to say there is that they will most certainly have some footage to show us probably early next year. And I know it's a musical, guys, but I think people are sleeping on this one, and I think even if you're not a fan of musicals like me, I mean, I kind of like them, but I don't particularly care about them. I think this will be something in of itself, like a piece of art that can very much so be appreciated, and I think people will come around on it when trailers start to drop. Let me know your thoughts on these photos, my theories on them, and everything else in this video. I just wanted to provide you guys with an extra news roundup before the end of the year. Again, I've got a couple more videos coming out all the way until January 1st, I believe. Until then, I hope you enjoy the rest of the videos for the next week. Like this video if you did enjoy it. I'd really appreciate that. Consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Double check that subscribe button. But until next time, guys, I hope you have a lovely rest of your year. Have a great new year, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.